Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Polish poppy seed rolls. That's right, a real Polish poppy seed roll is actually baked in a loaf and then sliced and served. But here I try to do individual rolls instead, as well as tweak a few other things. So these are only going to be like 50% authentic, which is still pretty good because I'm only 25% Polish. But the more important fact, these were 100% amazing. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by making a very simple sweet dough. And for that, we will add some warm milk to the bowl of our stand mixer, along with some dry active yeast, as well as about half a cup of our all-purpose flour. And then what we'll do is take a whisk and give this a quick mix until everything is nice and smooth. And then we will simply let this sit out on the counter for about 30 minutes to form what is generically referred to as a sponge. Since with some recipes it actually looks like a sponge when it's done, but this one not so much. Although it will definitely have thickened up and puffed up a little bit, and should be fairly bubbly. And then to our sponge we'll go ahead and add 2 large egg yolks, as well as a little touch of white sugar. We are also going to drizzle in some melted butter, as well as a nice big pinch of salt, followed by some vanilla extract. And please do me a favor and use the real stuff. And then once all that's in there, we'll take a whisk and give this another mix until we think everything is well combined. At which point I tossed in the rest of my all-purpose flour. And that's it, I grabbed my dough hook, and I started stirring this for no apparent reason. But eventually I grabbed this and headed to the mixer, where we're going to need this for about 5 minutes or so, or until a very, very smooth, very soft, slightly elastic dough forms. And no, this is not going to be one of those beautiful, neat dough balls that just pulls away from the sides. This is mostly going to sort of bunch up on your hook. And during the kneading time, it's not a bad idea to turn off the mixer once in a while and scrape that down with a spatula and continue on. And as usual, if it seems too wet, you can always add in a little more flour. But be careful, don't add in too much. Okay, we really do want this to stay nice and soft. And that's it, once we think this is kneaded long enough, we'll go ahead and remove that from the mixing bowl and transfer it onto a floured work surface. At which point it's always a good idea to give this a brief few second kneading, just to sort of feel where we're at. And if it still feels really sticky, we can always knead in a little more flour. But this was feeling just about perfect. And by perfect, like I already said, we're looking for something very, very smooth, very, very soft, but not too sticky, and definitely fairly elastic. And then what we'll do once we're very happy with our ball of dough is transfer it into a lightly buttered or oiled bowl, at which point we'll cover it and let it rise in a warm spot for a couple hours or until doubled in size. And please note, rich doughs like this do take longer to rise, so plan accordingly. And then what we'll do while our dough is rising is go ahead and make our poppy seed filling, which will start by adding some butter and milk to a saucepan, along with a couple spoons of Polish honey. And if you can't get that, you can substitute with Ukrainian honey, or the honey of your choice. And then to hedge our bets, we'll also add a little bit of sugar, as well as a splash of water, and then we'll set our heat to medium-high, at which point we will wait impatiently for this to come up to a simmer. And then as soon as it does, we will stir in a tremendous amount of poppy seeds. Okay, ideally you're going to want to go to one of those places that sells in bulk, which I'm not crazy about, by the way. I do not enjoy writing the code number on those tiny little white twist ties, but you will save some money. But regardless of where you get it, we're going to go ahead and cook this stirring for about 5 minutes or so, or until the mixture thickens up into what you would consider like a spreadable texture. And then what we'll do once we think our mixture is cooked long enough, and it hopefully looks a little something like this, is we'll turn off the heat, and then we'll let it cool down to room temp before we use it. Okay, so our filling is set, and we can move on to check our dough. And mine was looking pretty good, and it definitely doubled in size. And another clue is when you poke it, it holds the finger marks and starts to deflate. Okay, if those start springing back on you, it needs more time. And then what we'll do is go ahead and transfer this onto a floured surface. And then what we want to do is sort of deflate this, but at the same time form it into a tube shape. And then once we have something fairly uniform, we will want to sort of roll it back and forth under our hands until it's about 15 inches long, at which point we'll flatten it out. And then using just enough flour so things don't stick, we'll switch to a rolling pin and then attempt to roll this out into a nice big rectangle, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10 by 18 inches. Alright, give or take. And no, unlike certain kitchens where they test things, I am not going to pull out the yardstick. Do I even have a yardstick? But anyway, the point is this is not an exact science. And as long as you get a nice big rectangle of dough about 1/8 of an inch thick, I think you're going to be fine. And then what we'll do once that's been accomplished is go ahead and spread over our now cooled filling. And as we do this, we're going to want to leave about 1.5 inches uncovered along the edge we're going to roll towards. And then once that's set, before we roll this up, we'll use our finger to brush a little bit of water on that exposed dough. At which point, starting from the opposite edge, we will roll this up fairly tightly, but we do not want to stretch the dough as we do this. Otherwise, it will get too thin. And traditionally, these poppy seeds would be ground in like a spice mill to sort of break them up. Okay, they say it brings out more flavor, but I figured we're going to eat like a pound of these things. How much more flavor do we need? But anyway, you decide. I mean, you guys are, after all, the Margaret Meads of your poppy seeds. So feel free to grind those up if you want. But personally, I really do enjoy the texture of the whole seed. And what we'll do once we finish rolling that up, with ideally the seam somewhere on the bottom, is that we'll do a little fine-tuning, making sure that's as even as possible. And also at the same time kind of bringing both ends towards the center, so that we get something a little more compact, with hopefully a very, very consistent girth. And then once we're happy with how it's shaped, and at this point I have to admit I was very happy, we will take our bench scraper, and we'll go ahead and divide this into 8 equal portions. And if you think the ends have a lot of extra dough, you can always trim a little off. And then as far as prepping these for the pan, all we really need to do is turn them on their side, and maybe pinch a little bit of the dough underneath to sort of hold in that filling. And that is pretty much all there is to it. We'll just sort of press that down a little bit. But I don't want these too flat. So that's one down, and I moved on to the next one. And again, what I'm doing here is trying to pinch some of the dough underneath to maybe hold in the stuff better. But because like 50% of this is poppy seed, I was not having too much luck. But what that did do is make the top a little more dome-shaped, which may or may not give this thing a better shape when it's baked. Although having said that, it's been my experience with any kind of rolled baked good, once you turn them on their sides like this, they sort of have a mind of their own once they bake and puff up, which will usually result in some kind of variation in appearance. And as you're about to see, that's exactly what I got. And then what we'll do once those have been cut and sort of shaped is we'll transfer those onto a lined baking sheet, at which point you can, if you want, let them proof for about 20 minutes to a half hour, so they rise a little bit before they go in the oven. But I didn't, because that's going to result in a little bit of an airier and a little more puffier product. But I wanted something that was just a touch denser, which I thought would stand up better to this substantial amount of poppy seed filling. So I just let mine sit there for about 5 minutes before I transferred them into the center of a 375-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, or until they were beautifully browned and looked like this. And yes, as you can see, those are delightfully diverse in appearance, which is exactly what I was going for, he said with a straight face. And what we'll do is go ahead and transfer those to a cooling rack, since we really do want these to cool down completely before we enjoy them. And while those are cooling, if you want, we can paint on a simple sugar glaze, which is just powdered sugar thinned out with some water or milk. And I'm sure these would have been fine without it. But the actual traditional Polish poppy seed roll is almost always brushed with a glaze. But it was kind of funny as I did this. The shinier they got, the duller they became. Is that a paradox? Anyway, what I mean by that, it definitely shined up the dough parts. But as that sugar cooled down the poppy seed parts, it actually sort of took away the natural glistening those had when they came out of the oven. So maybe next time I won't do that. Although when you do glaze with sugar like this, it can help keep your rolls moist. So there is that. But anyway, I glazed and I waited. And once these were just about room temp, I dug in. Maybe a little bit early, but I couldn't wait. And that, my friends, was as amazing and delicious as it was unique and unusual. And because I didn't grind them, or use the egg whites to help bind them, I was kind of afraid that copious amount of filling was all going to crumble out. But you know what? It really didn't. It actually held together pretty well. And despite not grinding, there was no shortage of poppy seed flavor. But anyway, I scarfed that one down and then plated another one up. And I took a few more bites without pulling it apart, so you get a little better look at what's going on inside. And what's going on inside I find absolutely gorgeous. And the contrast between that soft, sweet dough and the crunch of those seeds, especially the exposed ones, I found to be extremely enjoyable and also very addictive. Which reminds me, if you have a drug test coming up, you may want to make these after that, since you will definitely fail it, so be careful. But anyway, that's it. Maybe one of these days I'll actually make a proper poppy seed roll. Or maybe I won't, because I really did think these were tremendous. Which is why I really do hope you give these a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.